or look at, if you want to look at any of the slides, there is a link. It should be shown at the bottom of most of these slides where it says bit.ly OSS-practical-steps. That also has a link to the slides as well as the GitHub repository that we'll be working on later. So I'm Yo. Nicoletta will be presenting in a few minutes. And these slides are licensed Creative Commons, which means that you are welcome to reuse them. If at any point I'm not looking at the camera, it's because I'm looking at my second screen on the left. I'm definitely still paying attention. So we're going to talk about the contributions to open source. But first, I'm going to ask a question to the audience straight away. So could I get folks to put in the chat if you've heard of open source, what you think it is, or if you're not sure, feel free to take a guess and just put that in the chat. I'd like to just get an idea of what you've all thought about that. And this is where I realize that Zoom can make it hard to see the chat when you're presenting. Okay, I found it. I'll just pause for a moment while you're typing. Yeah, that's a great answer, Rissy. So I see open source means freely accessible and available for public utilization. If anyone else has any other things or things they'd like to add, or maybe an example of a project that you really like that's open source, then feel free to add those as well. Margaret says source code that's made freely available for a possible modification and redistribution. Yep, that's another great definition. I'll give it a moment more if anyone else has any they'd like to share. Okay. All right, keep those coming in. Feel free to add more as we're going. But yeah, those are some pretty good definitions of what open source is. I'm also going to mention some of the things that open source isn't. So open source, like Rissy and Margaret have mentioned, means when source code is available, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the same thing as free, as in doesn't cost money. So you can get software that's free to use, where the source code isn't available. One example might be Zoom, which we're calling on today. In many cases, it can be free to use, but the source code is not available outside of Zoom as a business model. And equally, it is possible to have open source code that isn't free as in money. So these are not like essential parts of the definition, but just a common mistake that sometimes people can make around open source. And I see Kennedy mentions materials under license that enable reuse, remixing, redistribution. Another really great definition there. So this is the definition that I've put of open source. I think there's many different ways you can define it, but I've said open source is simply sharing the design for your work so that it can be reused and remixed by others. Very similar to yours there, Kennedy. And I've put a little star and said, and licensing it so that it's legal to reuse. And the reason that I mention that is that if you put your source code online and you don't put a license that says this is legal for people to reuse, then by default, it's actually not, in most cases, legal to reuse something. And so that's the whole thing where if you see something on the internet, you're not just supposed to copy and paste it, because actually the copyright lies with the person who created it, even if it's available on the internet. So if you are interested in open source, the first thing you want to be doing is just making sure that you've got a license that permits other people to reuse it. And Harriet, I see you've mentioned Linux, which is an example of an open source operating system, probably one of the most famous open source projects in the world, if not the most famous. So a great example there. So that's just a little bit, gentle definition of open source. And so I'm going to ask another question. Why? Why do we want to use open source, especially maybe from the research context, but it can be in general. So once again, just take a minute, post answers in chat, why you think open source might be important or useful. And we have a nice first answer here from Rissy. So for research reproducibility, and I know that yesterday, actually on day 4, you had a nice set of seminars about research reproducibility. So I will certainly agree with that one. So if your source code is not available to people, then they aren't going to be able to reproduce your work. They may be able to guess at what your work looks like and maybe produce something very similar, but they certainly won't be able to reproduce it exactly. And we have another one from Mosioma. I hope I pronounced your name okay there. Saying saves time not reinventing the wheel. And I, again, thoroughly agree with this one as well. I think it's actually on one of my slides, both of these answers, and then one of the next slides. And it's, if we're researchers and we're trying to work and build on each other's shoulders, then not having to do the same thing over and over again makes a lot of sense, but instead sharing our work so that we can then use each other's work more effectively and jump ahead further and faster. If anyone else wants to throw any more answers in the chat, please do so. But I am going to just hop along to my next slide. So why open source? So the first one I have here, I've said open source research code can be peer reviewed and reused. So if we're doing lab science, it's very normal to put your methods and for people to peer review and comment on those. It's less common these days to necessarily peer review source code, although it does happen in some scenarios. For example, Nicoletta is an editor of the Journal of Open Source Software, which is all about peer reviewing code. But yeah, as scientists and as researchers, we probably want our methods to be treated as scientific methods, and that includes the code. Hacker ethic, and here we go. No one should have to reinvent the wheel. We've discussed that one. Sharing your work, others will share back. And another one that I really like is that when you share stuff so that other people can reuse it, you kind of have to put documentation, because otherwise they'll just come and they'll be asking a bunch of questions about all the stuff that's not obvious. And the great thing is that if you're documenting for other people and you come back in 6 months, you've probably forgotten what you've done, but because you've written those docs, you will remember. So I say I'm documenting for me as well as other people when I write these docs, and it's a useful bonus of open source. And I see a question in the chat. Is open source normally available for use and normally licensed? I'm not quite sure what you mean. Maybe if you could elaborate on that in the chat, that would be great. And I will come back to it. So how do I know if software is open source? So I sort of mentioned this earlier, that there's scenarios where you may have put your code online, but it doesn't necessarily have the license to reuse it. So the first thing that you'll spot, usually in an open source repository, and when I say repository, that just means a code base, a place where your code is. There should be a file called license, or it might be called copying. Usually in all caps, which is why I've included on the slide that it might be all caps. And if you read on that, click on that, it will tell you how you can legally reuse that code. It's kind of boring, it kind of looks a bit legalese, but it is an important step when you're getting started. And so you say, okay, cool, right, I know I need to add a license, but what does that mean? How do I do it? So I don't want to go into this too much, just because literally you can spend hours and hours and hours talking about this and still not have all the nuance. I even have a whole book here just on open source licensing with like a bunch of bits of paper sticking out so that I can come back to it and read about it. And it still doesn't cover everything. But what I have got is a couple of links here that are really useful. So choosealicense.com is a really quick and straightforward way of understanding what licenses you can have. And then another site that I really like is tldrlegal.com. And so TLDR Legal, if someone says, oh yeah, I've got the MIT license, or I've got the new GPL license, or some other mysterious license name, you can go there and it will tell you in a few short bullet points what you can and cannot do with that license. So it's a really good, easy, quick way to understand what's going on with the licenses. What I will briefly mention is there's a couple of types of licenses available. There's ones that require that everything that you share is open source and that it stays open source indefinitely, which can be known as a copyleft or a viral license or a reciprocal license. I think those are all same names for the same kind of concept. And then there's ones that allow you to reuse it in any way you like, including closed source later on. And those are known as a permissive license. Permissive licenses tend to be more practical, but rather than bore you more with talking about licensing talk, I'm going to move on. And so next question is we're going to talk a bit about version control. And you may have noticed I am not afraid of leaving an awkward silence whilst people contribute in chat. So I have another awkward silence here, and I would love to know if anyone could tell me what version control is and maybe why you'd use it, and just type that in chat. I'm sure someone must have a little inkling or maybe a guess about what version control is. There we go. Awesome. Thanks, folks. So we have from Jacqueline, we have tracking and managing changes to code. From Irene, for tracking changes or modification. And for Rissy, we have an elaborate answer. Version control enables availability of documentation traced back on your source code. You can easily track changes and document the documentation as you go forward. Those are beautifully thorough and correct answers. So thanks for those, folks. Keep them coming if there's anything you'd like to add. So I will say this is an easy way to share code. People can download, reuse, and contribute. And you can view all of your files and jump back in time to any save point. So if any of you are computer gamers and you've ever had multiple copies of your save files so that you don't lose your favorite bit, version control is just about the same, basically. And we have another one from Margaret, recording changes to a file or a set of files over time so that you can recall specific versions. And from Ruth, version control is used to keep track of what you've done and collaborate with other people. Now, these are all really great definitions of how version control can be. So I'm just going to step out of these slides if I can get that going. Escape. And I'm briefly going to look at a repository on GitHub, which does version control. So here, this is the Open Life Science GitHub repository, and you can see there's 1,022 commits. If we stay with our computer gaming metaphor, that's 1,022 save points. If I can click on this, and you can see information, comments that we've made each time we've made a commit. And so some of them are a bit boring, talks about merging pull requests, but then you can see things here like update timeline, end is January 2022. I'm going to click on that just because I'm a little curious, but actually you can see here we'd made a typo. We'd said 2021 and actually we meant 2022. So basically it just gives you all these little updates about what you've done each time you've changed things. So here we fixed the date, for example, lots of merges, fixed the script, added some information and so on. And I can revert back to any of these points anytime I want. So I'll get back to my slides. So the repository I very briefly showed you, that was on GitHub. The GitHub is not the only place to put version control and to do open source collaboration, but it is one of the more popular ones. Another one is Bitbucket. There's also GitLab. They all do roughly the same thing. And there's no strong reason to choose one over another. The only thing I'll say is that Bitbucket and GitHub aren't actually open source themselves. They facilitate open source contributions, but the source code for them is not open, whereas GitLab is open source, which is one reason that you might like that one. And let's get my next slide. We've talked a bit about the fact that scientific reproducibility it can be facilitated by version control and by open source, which is fantastic. And with that, I think I'm going to hand it over to Nicoletta. You can stop listening to me talk, and we're going to do a practical exercise actually giving this a go. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Nice. Can you hear me? Fantastic. Oh, thank you very much. Well, I need to say the intro. Thank you very much for having me here today. Thank you, Kelly, for the great introduction. And thank you, Yo, for the talk. I think I do have a few things to learn from you about license. So maybe one day it would be great to have that long talk that you mentioned. So now we're going to go on the practical part. Like Yo said, there are several places, several websites that you can use to host your code and do this type of exercise that we're going to do today. But for today, we chose to use GitHub. I am going to share a link in the chat, which is going to be a link to GitHub. because what we first need to do is make sure that everybody has an account. Creating an account at GitHub is free, so there's no costing or anything involved. And if later you want, you can delete your account. So let me share a link. This is a link to GitHub. And from there, we could choose to log in or sign up. So if you all take a second and sign up, that would be great. I am going to demonstrate what you have to do using my screen. And then I'm not sure if we can do a poll or people can just give us a thumbs up once everyone has managed to get an account. So let me just very quickly share this. So this is my GitHub and I'm currently logged in, but I am going to create a private window, which allows me to treat GitHub and I can just go here and just say that actually I want to sign up. So the link I share will bring you to this page, and I'm just going to go on the top right side and I'm going to click on sign up. And welcome here. Let's begin the adventure. So I need to give my email. So I'm just going to go ahead.
Nicoletta, I think we still see your other screen.
Oh, good one. Worked for you, didn't work for me. There we go. So now you should be able to see this.
Looks good.
So here I am, and it's asking me to give me my email. I'm just going to go ahead and give it an email. I'm going to click on continue. It's going to ask me for my password. I'm not going to tell you my password out loud. It's telling me it's very strong. It's a good thing. And if I click on continue, then it's going to ask me for a username. And here I can choose whatever username that I like. I'm just going to go for this, for example, and it's going to tell me that it's not available because this is actually my actual username. So I'm just going to say 13. Well, now I'm a new person. And if I click on continue, this will then create an account for me. Product updates. And I need to start a puzzle. So this is what we have to do to get an account. I'm not going to finish this because I already have an account on GitHub and I don't want to create another one. So could we get a thumbs up from everyone if you already have an account and managed to sign in, or if you, yeah, Stefan, perfect. Or would a poll be better? I don't know how to do polls. Fantastic. Is there anyone that has not managed to make an account or sign in? If yes, please just raise your hand. No hands, so I'm going to assume that everyone has managed to create an account and sign in. But if not, please feel free to interrupt us, right? We're not in a rush, so we just want to make sure that everyone is up to speed. Nice. Amia hasn't. Fantastic. So while Amia is creating their account, sorry, I'm sorry if I used the wrong pronouns there. While they're using while they're signing up, please feel free to chat with Yo if you're having any issues. And I'm just going to talk briefly about what we're going to do today while waiting for everyone to catch up. So I'm going to go once again and share my account on my screen. So this is GitHub, and today we are going to work on a repo. And you showed an example of a repo just a second ago. But today we're going to be working on a different one. We're going to be working on the repo Getting Started with Open Source. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paste the link to this repo in the chat. And when I say repo, I mean repository, but it's a very long word, which I find confusing sometimes. So I'm just saying repo for short. Chat, and this is the link to the project. So I created this project a few days ago, and all the files that you can see here, are files that are necessary to render a website. And if I scroll down in the README, which is a file that has information about the project, such as the title, and you can see I also have a section that says this is licensed, this project is being licensed, which means that you can use it to run workshops like this if you wish. We have several informations, and one of them is the link to the actual website. So if I click on this, it's going to take me to the website. And we can see there is a very, very plain website, and it just has some information. So welcome to a website Getting Started with Open Source. The people behind this website are Yo, and we can see that my main name is missing. But we'll get to this in a second. What we are asking you to do today is change the repo on GitHub, such as that your names can appear in the list of entities. And I'm going to demonstrate how we're going to do this by adding my name here, which I forgot. So like I said, everything that you're seeing here, the website is being rendered, but all the files that exist in this repository. So if I want to apply a change to the website, all I have to do is apply a change to this project. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. I see that all the hands are not raised, no hands are raised anymore. So I'm assuming that we all managed.
Yeah. Just quickly, could you maybe zoom in a couple of times?
It's really good.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Perfect. Thank you. Nice. So I'm going to just demonstrate to you now how we can add things to the website. And yes, that's what I'm going to do. So this is the website, and what I want to do, this is the repo, and what I want to do is go here on the upper right side and click on Add File, because I want to add my name in the list of entities, in the list of maintainers. And to do this, I actually have to go in this folder that is called Data Maintainers. If I click on it, and I need to create a file that is with my personal information. So I'm going to go back and then say, okay, I want to add a file, and I want to create a new file. And GitHub takes me forward to this page now, where here we can see the name of the project, and here is where I say I want this file to be created. So I want this file to be under maintainers, and I just hit the slash button to say, oh, this is a folder. So under Getting Started with Open Source, there is a, this is not, let's see. Made a mistake. So under Getting Started, there is a folder that is called Data. And in there is a folder that is called Maintainers. I am known to make a lot of typos, so please, if you see a typo, let me know. And in here, I want to create a file that is going to be about me as a person. And I'm just going to have to give that file a name, and I'm just going to give it my last name, so we know that this file actually corresponds to me. And I'm just going to do .yaml, which is just the file extension that we'll be using. In here, I need to add the information about me. And the way that I create the website is that you need to do -name and say the name of the person, which is going to be Nicoletta. And my last name is Lynette. So now let's assume that I forgot exactly how the structure needs to be. And I'm like, okay, what else do I need to give? Well, what I can do is if I go back to the main page, I say, okay, did the maintainers actually give me some help on how to do things here? And we can see that, yes, there is a documentation. So how to add the DDs? Perfect. So if I click on this and I start reading, I can see that there are fixes, fantastic. And I can see that there's also information, because it has been documented, on how you need to apply these changes to the website. And I can see that it says, okay, if you want to create a new entity, you need to give it a name, and it would be great if you also give it your GitHub account. So I'm just gonna go, perfect. So now I know, so I need to go back here. I need to hit a tab, and I need to say, okay, and GitHub, and I'm gonna give it my GitHub username. So this is the information that I have to give. So now that I've edited the file, I'm going to scroll down, and here we're going to see that GitHub is giving us this little tab that says commit new file. And this goes back to what Yo showed you before. These are the save points. So I'm about to save my game. There are two things that we have to give at each save point. One is the title, and the title should be short and explain what this change is doing, what is this change applying to the code base. And here we can actually give more information to the description body. We can give more information about this change. So the title is going to be just add involved as a maintainer, which is short and to the point. And in the description, this is a small change, so you would argue that a long description is not needed. But I'm going to go and say added a file in the containers folder. Let's say, for example, here's asking me the email that I want to apply this change with. I'm just going to use my email, and then it's going to ask me if I want to commit directly or if I want to create a branch. I'm going to go ahead and click on create a branch. And what this means is that it's going to take the project as it is. It's going to create a copy of the project, and then I'm going to apply this change later on. And by creating a branch, it allows me to ask the maintainers if they want this change in their code base, and it allows them to review that change. So by doing this, then I can click on propose new file. GitHub again forwards me to a new page, and here we can see this is where the pull request happens. This is where I'm asking people, hey, I made this change. Would you like my code? And I can just click on create pull request on the bottom right, and this creates the pull request. Now, you, for example, could come here and you could peer review my code and say, oh, actually, you know what, you misspelled your name or you misspelled something else. And this conversation would happen here, which is publicly and available for everyone. So this is the task that we would like you to do today. We would like you to add your names, not in the list of the maintainers, but in the list of entities. And when you do that, you can reverse, and for example, your names will appear under here. I'm going to stop sharing. Please share your details. Perfect. So would be the best way to do this, Joy, is go into breakup rooms, and then we lead the conversation with the people in there?
I think that sounds good. Is it, Caleb, is it okay to break people into breakout rooms of 3 or 4 where people can maybe talk amongst themselves if they have any questions for 7 minutes? Does that sound good?
Yes, that's perfect. I can create 7 rooms.
While Caleb's doing that, folks, so the task is, just as a reminder, to go to the GitHub repository. We stopped sharing the screen, but if you go to the GitHub repository, which we'll post the link again in the chat, and in the data maintainers, create a file with your name, and there's a little tutorial in the link that we've posted in the chat, which will remind you how to do it. If at any point you are stuck or you have any questions, then you can always use the ask for help, and we can transport into your breakout room and help you, or you can ask the people in your room and maybe they can help you walk through it as well.
I am going to also paste a link to the tutorial. That shows how we can do this.
Yeah, so 4 breakout rooms ready. That makes about 8 participants each. Is that okay?
Yeah, take it away.
To make sure that since we have extra time, would we like to take a few more minutes to make sure that everyone has managed to open a pull request? Sounds good. Perfect. So we'll be merging pull requests soon, so then we can all see our names appear on the website. And are there any people that have any questions or would like an extra 5 minutes to keep up, 2 minutes to open the pull request? But are there any questions as well? Please feel free to write them in the chat or unmute yourselves and me or you can take them. I'm going to share my screen again. So what we can see now here is going back to the project. So this is the link that I shared with you. Everybody, this is the page that you went to. And we can see that there are a few tabs. And one of them is pull requests. So if I click on here, I can see that there are new 13 open pull requests. And this is one of you asking to add your names to the website. If I click on this, I can see that this is what a pull request looks like. GitHub is very good at giving us information. So for example, you can see again, there are several tabs, and here we can see that there is the commit, there is the save points, this is the change that is trying to be applied to the website. And I can even click on it and I can see added my name and GitHub username. I can click on files change and I can see which files were created. And I can also see with greens the things, the lines of code that were added to this file. So if let's say there was a typo or something that I wanted to comment on, I could very easily just click on this plus button. And here is where the communication is happening when the code is being developed. And this is where this is very powerful because it allows us to communicate, and it allows us to communicate in a way that all these things that happen, the history, the questions, the answers, everything stays on GitHub and is open for other people to revisit at any given point. So this is a pull request. I think it looks great. So if I have no comments, I can just say, give a thumbs up and say, thank you. I can just comment. And what I can do is I can just merge the pull requests and I can confirm the merge. So what's happening now is like, hey, do you want my code? And I can say, your code looks amazing. I want your code. And then I can just merge it. And by doing this, if I now go back to what the website looks like, so I'm just going to go back to the code tab and click on the link. I can see now that if I refresh, Name does not appear. And is that my history? Let me merge another one. And this doesn't work, then I can check my cookies. So if I go to Brenda wants to be add their name, you can see everything looks great. So I'm once again going to click on merge pull request, confirm merge. Perfect. Going back to the code. Let me stop sharing for a second. Let me clean my cookies.
I think that maybe some of the names, the GitHub isn't indented in some of the pull requests, which might be stopping the build.
Okay, so let me just accept one with the name isn't added, and then we can check if this is the case. Perfect. That didn't work. I can share my screen so you guys see what I'm seeing. I'm not doing any magic. Okay. Going back to pull request. Big change. So we can see here the name and everything seems to be fine. And the file is at the data maintainers. It seems to be great. Let's pull request confirm. Perfect. And if I go to the home page, I can now go at the data maintainers and I can see that all these finds have been created. Perfect. And then I can just click on the link and refresh. And the build is not working. How about I take 5 minutes to investigate this? Is that okay?
Sounds good. In the meantime, whilst Nicoletta is troubleshooting on the fly, folks, does anyone have any questions or any things where maybe you got a little bit stuck or something didn't happen as you'd expected that you'd like to ask about? And yeah, one thing I think maybe, Nicoletta, just as a thought, is that maybe if we've merged ones that have slightly bad syntax, even the new good ones are still not building. It looks like you've got it. So folks, just as a hint about the reason we think it's not quite working in real time right now is largely because YAML, the .yml files that we're using, is very sensitive to white space. And so we had the first line, which was name, and the second line, which was GitHub. And the GitHub needed to be indented, I think, by 2 spaces exactly. And in cases where it wasn't indented, that may be what's causing the error. This is speculation right now. Speculation due to long experience with accidentally doing one too many spaces or not enough spaces. So no one's done anything wrong here. So don't worry if your pull request has been merged and it's not showing. You have done a great job and you have made a beautiful open source pull request. What I would do in the meantime, I have a few more slides that I can present. Where I'm just going to talk about getting started. So what you've done now, you've gotten the feeling for using GitHub to actually do the mechanics of making a pull request, but I'm going to talk a bit about if you know, let's say a project that you want to contribute to, some of the steps that you might take to actually get started and get involved. So I'm going to quickly share my screen again. I'll just get onto the right slide. And share screen, desktop 2, share. I'll put that in present mode. I'll try. There we go. Right. So first step's contributing to someone else's repository. So unsurprisingly, getting started is often the very best way to start learning about how to do this. So my recommendation, if you have a project that you are interested in or that you admire, so maybe you work with, I don't know, BioPython or Matplotlib, or there's some other repository that's of particular interest to you, go and have a look. And the really big repositories will really often have guides, much like when Nicoletta was showing that there was a tutorial on the sample repository that we were just working with. If an organization really wants people to contribute to their open source work, they will have steps to show how. So have a look, maybe there's a file called contributing.md, maybe there's something on the README that tells people how to get started. And another couple of tips that I really like is on GitHub, you could use the tags like first timers only. You can try firsttimersonly.com, which is literally just curated issues for people who've never done a pull request before and would like to give it a go. Another good GitHub tag that you can look for if you search for GitHub issues is the good first bug is another one that's really good. And right now we are in October, and October is a great month for nerds, because if you want to be learning about doing pull requests, you can get a free t-shirt if you do enough pull requests. I think it's 4 or 5 pull requests for an event called Hacktoberfest. I'm going to see if I can open that. Here we go, Hacktoberfest. So if you click on here and you register for Hacktoberfest, then you do enough pull requests, you will get a free t-shirt at the end of it. So I have a couple of those. I should have won one today, didn't think of it. But it is a really nice way to sort of reward you for contributing to other people's work, or as a maintainer to get more contributors to your work. Another one that can come around in December sometimes is 24 pull requests, which is 1 pull request for each day of the month. And so these are just little ways to incentivize and think about getting started. So let's say I've chosen a repository and I know what I want to do. I know I want to contribute to them. Here's an example of a scenario where someone has contributed. So on the top right here, you can see where Isaac Ikes, who is my friend, has created an issue on GitHub where what he's asked for is that the navigation bar for the website be centered and that a search bar be added. And then later down at the bottom, you can see where Padma has said, hey, can I work on this issue? She's volunteered to help us out. So just walking through that again, you find something that you want to do. It's often recorded as an issue on GitHub. Read through the issue, and if you think it makes sense, you know what needs to be done, you can say, hello, I'm here, put your hand up, say, hey folks, I would like to work on this. And by commenting on it, it just gives the indication to others that you're working on it, and people know not to pick it up instead of you or as well as you. If you're not sure about something that they're asking, it's also okay to say, hey, this sounds interesting, but I'm not sure what file I need to edit, or I'm not sure about something else. It's okay to ask these questions on the issue. This is what the issue is for. Then once you think you know what needs to be done, make those changes. So for example, that might be editing it via the GitHub UI, which is the example that we tried earlier. That can be clunky sometimes. So you may want to try using programs like GitHub Desktop, or there's a way in the command line in the terminal to use GitHub, or there's other programs called, there's one called SourceTree, another one called GitKraken. And these are all ways to use Git to modify code that you can install on your desktop. We won't go into the details of those today. Another note that I have, so you've all made pull requests when we were working with the repository that Nicoletta was working on. If you use GitLab, it's also known as a merge request, but it's the same thing. It's basically saying to the repository maintainer, here, I've made a change. Would you like to pull it or to merge it into your code base? And it may be that they'll offer feedback. So for example, in the scenario that we were just trying out, and a couple of times when it looks like maybe we were missing a white space, The feedback might be, hey, do you want to add this white space before we merge it? Or it might be, this is blue, and actually, honestly, I really wanted red. So it could be all sorts of things, but it's quite common for someone to politely say, hey, this is good, thank you, but can you make this change before I pull it back into my code base? So that's nothing to worry about, it's quite normal. And so I will just walk through and show you more about the issue that I showed earlier on my screen. Not gone too far. Let me get that open. It's this one. Here we go. So this is the issue that where Isaac said we need these navigations to be in the center and the search bar added. Padma said, hey, can I work on this? And Isaac, he's like, yeah, sure, go for it. And he also added the Hacktoberfest label, which means that Padma will get credit towards a t-shirt if so she wants it. And then you can also see the pull request that she worked on. It's linked to here, so I'm just going to open that up on my screen very quickly. Here we go. So this is her pull request. You can see that Padma made it, and you can see that 3 files have been changed. So you can see she's done some code to work on the search bar, and some more information adding that search bar in. And then this is just some styling, giving the colors and the design for that search bar that she's implemented. And so it's super, super clear. And so in this case, Tiz, he reviewed this, he said this is good. He's also shared that there was a little place where it was a little bit strange, the layout, and he's even included a video just as a feedback. And so you can kind of see that it doesn't quite highlight completely. But he's also pointed out that, you know, it does what it needs to be done. And so we have, in fact, if you scroll down a little bit, we have merged that commit in. And so that is the process of merging something when you want to contribute to someone else's repository. And then I added one more slide here, which is a question. What if I look at a repository and I still have no idea what to do? And sometimes this happens. It might be a scenario where maybe people don't particularly want contributions, and so they don't have guides. And in that case, that is not your fault. Do not feel bad if you look at a repository and you think, it happens. There's 2 things you can do. You can say, hey folks, I want to help, but I really don't know where to get started. If they have an email or something, or, you know, somewhere to leave messages, they might not. Or alternatively, you can say, oh well, and move on and find somewhere else, because there are definitely plenty of repositories where maybe they're no longer maintained, or maybe people don't have the energy to merge pull requests. Or maybe they don't even want contributions, which can happen as well. It could be open source so that people can reuse it, but they don't particularly need contributors. Nicoletta, how are things going? I will stop sharing and I will give it back to you.
Fantastic, thank you. Thank you for your patience, everyone. And your intuition was right. It was some of the YAML formats, but that was me not being very clear, and it was not a big issue. Managed to fix it. I'm gonna share my screen and show you what the website looks like. That's okay. And I did get some direct messages, and I will try to reply to them as soon as I can. But for now, let me just show you what the website, website looks like now. Fantastic. There we go. So now we're back in the GitHub repo, and if I scroll down and I click to the website, I can see now that not only Joe's name is there, but now there are a few more names. Caleb's name is there, Brenda's, George, Irene's. So this is what it's going to look like once your pull request has been merged in. Like I said, the issue was that there was some syntax, slight typos. But what I am going to do is I am going to go to the pull request, and I'm going to review every single one of them. And if something needs to be changed, I'm going to leave a comment, and it would be great if you can reply there, and we can have, again, what I said, this conversation, and hopefully get your name on the website. So I'm going to take my time to go and read and reply to all the pull requests, if that sounds good. And then, yeah, we could then at the end of today share the link to the website again, and you can all check that if you had a pull request, your name is now up.
Awesome. So we've talked a whole bunch. Folks, any questions about open source in general, about the pull request process, or anything else?
Perfect. Let me just Risi asked a question. So there was some connection issues, and she missed they missed one part. So I'm just going to share the link to the tutorial now on the chat, and this is where you can find information on how to add your name to the website. And like I said, we'll be online and we'll be looking at the repo. So even if you open the pull request later today, I will be happy to review it and help you get the name of the website.
Okay, if no one else has any other questions, I do have a few more slides I can run through just to talk about the getting started of open source and maybe applying it also to your own code. But I will leave a few moments more awkward silence, or if anyone else folks want to suggest anything, then I'm very open to it. And questions in the chat via DM or to everyone, or unmuting if you can. I'm not sure if anyone can unmute, are all super welcome. And oh, it's also important to mention, there is no question too stupid. Trust me, if there's a mistake or an error or a question you have, we've all asked it before and we've all been there. Okay, in that case, I will share my screen and I'm going to run through these slides. Let's put it on present. Cool. Okay, so I briefly earlier mentioned a couple of good places to get your feet wet in open source can be First Timers Only and Hacktoberfest. It is Hacktoberfest now, so I heartily recommend signing up. You not only do you get those t-shirts, you get stickers. I've got a little coaster here that says Hacktoberfest. It's quite nice. But another one that I wanted to highlight is the Journal of Open Source it's open source software. I don't know why I've put open science software there on my slide. So if you are writing code for your research and you want people to review that, you want it to get some credit for the code you're writing and not just the papers that you're writing, submit a paper to JOS. I was an editor for a while, haven't been. Nicoletta still is, and there's a bunch. It is literally the most friendly paper review you've ever seen. It is not common that your paper will be reviewed with emoji. In JOS, that will happen. And I mean, we all need a few more emoji in the world. A few more things. If you are a student, consider signing up to Google Summer of Code. So this is a really great initiative. You get paid for 3 months to work on open source code, and you get the experience of working on open source code. And meanwhile, the people who are taking your contributions get 3 months of work from someone. So it ends up being a really nice little exchange. And my experience with Google Summer of Code is that really often if you form bonds with the people that you're working with, then they'll share job vacancies, etc. later on as things come around. So one of my previous job, I think like 3 of the previous hires that we had were Google Summer of Code students. So it's a really nice opportunity to get involved with open source communities. There is Outreachy, which does not require you to be a student to participate. Outreachy is almost the same as Google Summer of Code, except that it is a bit broader. So it happens twice a year. So Google Summer of Code, annoyingly, it focuses on the Northern Hemisphere because summer is not a global universal thing. And for people in the Southern Hemisphere, it can be a bit of a pain when you want to contribute, but actually it's winter and you are not on a summer break. Whereas Outreachy runs twice a year, so your summer break can be when your summer break is really happening, and it does stuff that's not code. So if you're interested in open source, but you want to work on design or documentation or something else, then you can apply, and you don't have to be a student as well. Equally, if you run your open source project already yourself, then you can recruit Google Summer of Code interns, and you can recruit Outreachy interns. I previously mentioned 24 pull requests, but I also want to mention open science hardware. We've talked mostly about software and open source software, but open source doesn't need to stop at code. It can also be hardware. I mean, to be honest, a recipe for cooking, if you share that openly and allow other people to reuse it and to change it, that's an open source recipe of food, right? But science in particular can strongly benefit from open science hardware. So taking a look at the global open science hardware community is also really quite a good call. I have a moment again. If there's any more questions so far, I'll stop share and check if there's anything in the chat. I'm going to flip this, actually. I'm going to ask a question to the audience instead. So folks, has there been anything that you've found a little bit tricky or a little bit hard so far, or maybe something that's frightened you? I thought, oh, I like that, but I'm afraid to do X. Maybe we could talk through those and help calm any of those fears or worries or solve any of those issues. So if you have found any of those, I would be really grateful if you could share that in the chat. I'm going to gently interpret this as if everyone is just like that Nicoletta's tutelage has been so excellent here that there just weren't any problems. I see from George, I think after some practice, I can assess myself well. Practice definitely makes perfect with this. The fun thing is like GitHub's user interface changes a little bit. Like my last job for the last year, I haven't coded nearly as much as I used to. I think I need some more practice too, because it's changed just now. So I'm like, oh, where's that button gone? Or that looks slightly different. Practice is amazing. Have you dealt with imposter syndrome, especially in practicing open source? Oh yeah. Absolutely. So there's two sides. There's the personal one where you think like, right, am I good enough to contribute or to run an open source project? Because that's something that I certainly have been doing on my side for quite some time now. And you know, what if people spot that actually I don't know what I'm doing? Trying to think of some good examples. Oh, but the other side I think actually is that on the other side, once you are running something, recognizing that other people may feel the imposter syndrome is super important. That's part of the reason why I say there is no question too stupid, right? It does not happen. We've all wondered these, and I don't know about anyone else, but there are times when I'm sitting in a tutorial and someone asks a question, I think, thank God you asked that. I didn't want to be the person who had to ask that question. And so I guess part of this is being humble and understanding that when you're asking, you're helping people, not just yourself, but also other people can really help out. If you know how to write code, or you know how to design, or to do documentation, or whatever other open source contribution you may be interested in, you do know how to do it. And it may be that little things vary from a community to community, or it may be that so occasionally norms may vary from one place to another. So long as you go in and you're humble and you're willing to learn, it is okay to get started. It's also okay to admit when you're scared. So I know someone who was an outreach intern for 3 months, and they were a little bit nervous, and they said, I'm not comfortable like doing video calls. And so at first they did text communication, they felt a bit safer that way. And then eventually they got to voice, but they never did video. And just being honest about where you are. If you're in a nice place, like for example, at the start of this call today, we said there's a code of conduct, right? You need to treat each other with respect. And hopefully in scenarios where we're introducing like this, where the first thing we say is value everyone else that you're working with, then the people will understand that, and they'll say, hey, yeah, I recognize that you're new, and I'm going to try and help you. I'm going to try and guide you. But sometimes taking those first steps is scary. Nicoletta, you might have something to add here.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with what you said. And, you know, I don't want to use the word funny, but like, I find like every time I have conversations with not only open source people, but also I work in an institute, even in the institute, everybody brings up imposter syndrome. And that is because everyone's feel it. It's like, it doesn't matter if you're a professor, if you're a PhD student, if, you know, there is like we all doubt ourselves and our capabilities continuously, and especially when there's so much knowledge and outside the world, like we feel like we have to compare ourselves with other people, and that's not true. And I think maybe something else, like and you again spoke about it, like it's okay to say that you're lost, it's okay to ask a question. And sometimes we fall into these loops that we only hear about the success stories, and we don't focus on how hard it was for those people to get to the success stories. The first time I opened a pull request, I had to close the entire pull request down because I broke everything. Like, at least that's how I felt. And I closed it, and they were like, no, it's okay. You can open it again, and we can, fix the mistakes, and it's okay. And you might think that, oh, now we are experts, and no, we're not. I still, it took me a second to figure out what was wrong with the website. But what happens is that you get more intuition the more that you work on projects, and then you can resolve issues maybe a little bit faster. But it doesn't mean that you don't create issues anymore, and it doesn't mean that you don't make mistakes anymore. So I think it's good to share these stories as well, and not just the success stories. So I think, yes, that's what I had to say on the imposter syndrome question. Okay. And maybe one last thing, and that also came up recently. And like I said, there's so much knowledge out there, and we feel like we need to compare ourselves with other people. But it's true that we are all really good at something, and we're not all really good at the same thing, but we're all really good at the thing that we like and we enjoy doing, and we consider ourselves to be experts at it. And maybe you're not as good as I'm not as good as knowing licenses as Yo, but I'm a bit better at something else, and then we can learn from each other, and we can be kind to each other, like you already said. And then of course I'm gonna feel like I know less than other people, but at the same time I know more than other people at one data point, and that's enough. When was the first time you contributed to an open source? Everyone, and you, Yo. It was your first contribution.
I can answer now. Folks, if you want to maybe share in chat, and if you say today, we will be super delighted. If you don't say today, that's fine too. We'd love to hear. But I'll talk a little bit whilst people are typing. So actually, hilariously for me, I think I first learned about open source while I was doing my undergrad. And my undergrad took a very long time. It took me 9 years to graduate from my undergrad. I did it part-time while I was working. And I read about open source and thought, hey, this is cool. You know, like this idea of just everyone giving code away for free. I'm like, this is amazing. But I'm like, I just don't see how anyone can do it. This isn't practical. And then I got to my undergrad thesis, and this was only 2015. And I had to do a project, and it was partly code and then partly the write-up around the code. And I said to my supervisor, I think I want this to be open source. And they're like, yeah, okay. They said, until after you've submitted it, don't make it open, but then that's fine if you want to make it open. So I did that. And I put my code on GitHub. It's still there. No one has ever used it. Not even a tiny bit. I had no idea what I was doing. It was just like, I don't think it would run anymore. I think it depended on some Google Cloud services that have since been discontinued. But I think it sort of points to the fact that people can sometimes say, I'm a bit afraid to put my code online because I might, you know, someone might spot something wrong or they might steal it. Well, it's possible. The more likely is if your code's not ready for other people to look at, no one will look at it because there is so much code online out there. But the other side of that is also that if you aren't necessarily setting something up and guiding people to contribute and how to participate, then people probably won't contribute and participate in most cases. Which is sort of why I included that slide that said, you know, if you look at a repository and you can't figure out how to contribute, that's fine. Sometimes it happens and it's probably not your fault. So at this point, I kind of tried to create something open source, and certainly it was technically open source, but it wasn't very open source. I guess it had a license, but no contributors. And I sort of had come to the conclusion that open source was just naive and not something anyone could really do. And then one day I saw this job advert, and it just happened to be a job advert in Cambridge for the technology stack that I'd been working with as a software engineer. I'm like, yeah, there's no chance I'm going to get a job at Cambridge, but I'll give it a go. And I applied, and I was really pleased to find out that I got the job. But basically, the only reason that I learned how to contribute to open source was because someone employed me to do it, and they paid me to do it full time. And that's part of the reason why I'm so I like teaching people about it, because I know how hard it can be to make your first steps. I know that I didn't figure it out on my own, and I want to help other people to learn how to do that and to take those steps further. I don't know if anyone else wants to share those contribution. The first time they contributed to open source in chat. We really would love to see some more. I'll also add another option to the question. Has there ever been a time when you've been involved with open source and it hasn't gone well that you'd like to share? Maybe we can talk about that, maybe about ways that you might change it in the future, or it might not be. I mean, it's almost certainly not your fault, but ways that you can deal with this type of stuff, or maybe just something you were afraid to share, or even someone told you not to. Or I'll add the opposite. Any awesome times where you've contributed to open source and it's been really, really great. Tell us about your glories, your great things, as well as the sad things. And thanks, Harriet and Yedimon. I'll also call out a couple of names since I recognize some of the faces here. Caleb or Mike, maybe do either of you have any experiences around open source that you might like to share with others, or questions?
Hi, Chief Mike is something. So for me, actually, I started working, I think it was during my PhD that I started more or less exploring how I can contribute to open source and how I can go about that. I think the learning journey was great, Steve, and I think that's the reason why when I came back, I started actually promoting open science and open source and just easing the pathways for others to contribute to that. So my experience was mostly working on my own project, but also as I move towards open educational resources, I've done a lot of contributions to open educational resources, and it's been quite a rewarding experience getting to see your contributions and just getting to learn as you contribute as well. Because, and I think when it comes to contribution to open source, it doesn't necessarily need to have really advanced skills. There are some of the really simple things that you can contribute, make it easy for others to understand. Even if it's a software you've been using for a really long time and you know the software really well, you may not contribute code to it, but you can contribute to documentation. You can make the documentation easy to understand. You can create tutorials and so forth. So there's so many pathways to contributing to open source.
I 100% agree with Caleb that there's so many other ways that is not just code. And documentation, I think, is the perfect first way to contribute, because you try to learn about a project and you read through the documentation and you struggle. And if you struggle and you want to make it better because you want to use the tool, I think contributing documentation is very important, sometimes more important than contributing code.
I'll even expand on that a little, because actually one thing I don't think we've mentioned, both Nicoletta and I, for a while we worked together on the PLOS open source toolkit. And what that was basically a blog that highlighted different open source publications, papers that had a software component. And sometimes we'd have like 60 candidate papers, and you'd find 5 that actually had code that you could run. And that I think was partly just because, I think I mentioned in one of the slides earlier, code is often not peer reviewed, so people don't check whether or not the code is useful and can be run when they submit a paper. And so it definitely firmed up my personal experiences and feelings that if you are sharing code as part of your research, that you need to make sure that there is running documentation. And like, I sometimes compare this to cooking with a recipe or without a recipe. So if you are cooking something really familiar, then it's really easy. You don't need any guide. You know what you do. You pop that in, you boil it for 10 minutes, or you mash that or whatever, and it's going to come out and it's going to be consistent and it's going to be great. So that's when you know what you're doing. But if you have something unfamiliar, if someone gives you a box of food, you've never seen any of these ingredients before, if you don't have the running documentation, the instructions about how to cook it, you can try and something might happen and it might be good or it might not. And code is the same, right? If it's code that you're really familiar with, let's say I code in R every day. If I look at someone's R repository, I might think, actually, yeah, this is, I know how to run this, but it might be that actually there's a bunch of steps missing. Whereas if there's documentation that we know for sure that anyone who is comfortable running some R code can look through, they can step through those steps and understand how to get on with those. So having documentation, like Nicoletta said, quite often it can actually be almost more important than the code itself, because otherwise you just don't know what you're doing and the results aren't going to be consistent. I know Ruth says, I've contributed to open source projects over the course of my master's research, also in some H3A BioNet projects and carpentries lessons. And I will extra shout out for carpentries. They do so much great computational training for researchers. Has anyone else done carpentries or any other similar courses that they found useful that they might want to shout out here?
Yeah, for me, I would just say that I'm currently undergoing the training as a carpentry instructor. So still, I am here to make some contributions to the repositories as a requirement. But I hope it will be a great experience because I have interacted with some of their materials online on GitHub.
I see a note from Pradeep, press 1 to carpentries and OLS. OLS is the Open Life Science, the Open Science Mentoring and Training Program that I co-run with a few other people. I know Malvika, one of the other co-founders, was speaking yesterday. And we hear from Rissi, I'm currently a participant of some of the carpentry courses through HCA BioNet, hoping to be able to transition into a trainee in the future. I think that might mean trainer. But yeah, I hugely valued the carpentries training I did a few years ago as well. And we have a question. How do you think about those scientists that do not share code in their paper, asking this question regarding genome annotation of plants specifically? As a PhD candidate, it is quite challenging to figure this out. So my personal feelings on this one is that we don't incentivize code sharing. And so I don't think it's fair to get really angry at people for not doing it. And that what we should do is we should try and change the system so that it is normal and accepted that we share code. And so that's incentivized to do it. Because if someone, does a paper like a genome plant annotation paper and they can get it passed without any of the code sharing, and it takes less time that way, right? Then why would anyone want to spend more time on actually sharing the code? So we don't always have the right incentives around making sure that we make it's almost like our science is unscientific, which is a bit sad. Because if we really want to be scientific about this, we make sure that we have all of the analysis code, which is a method, right? I don't know, Nicoletta, you might have something else you'd want to add on that.
No, I agree. I think it's just a continuous cycle. It takes a lot of time and effort for people to write the code and write it properly, and sometimes they don't get recognized for it. So it's easier to just say, "Oh, maybe I shouldn't," go to that length. And then it's also the journals themselves that they do not ask you to share your score. Things are getting better. Like, we need to be a bit positive. Things are definitely getting better, and even one of the big journals in my field, Nature, for example, they did this huge announcement. They said, "Oh, now we can ask people to share their code," and they have some guidelines what it means to be well documented, for example, and things like that. So journals are trying to be a bit better, but I agree that we shouldn't necessarily blame the scientists for it. I think it's just that cycle of it's a lot of work. You don't get recognized for it. People don't ask for it, and I think we just need to be better in general. We need to give people credit for writing code. Generals needs to do the job a bit better as well, right? Because it's not, they should ask for these things, and then they should have people to review the code as well. And it's not all then also fair to ask the paper, at least in my experience, I don't think it's fair to ask the people who are reviewing the paper to also review the code, because it's maybe, of course, they can look at the code, but it would be even better if we had a system that people review the code and the paper, but also people really look at the code and try to make it better and more documented and things like that. But then you have to create new jobs, and it'd be fantastic if the journals actually do that. It's a big problem.
I'll also add that it's not only the journals. I mean, I think I agree we need systemic change. But for example, I work at a funder. The Wellcome Trust is a lot of life science funding. And some of the grants that we've awarded over the last year or so, we've had conditions in the grant that say the code must be open source. And it must be sufficiently documented that other people can rerun it and so on. And so it would be nice to see more funders. I mean, because ultimately funders have a lot of power, and seeing more funders actually say publicly, we expect you to share your work so that others can benefit from it. Because ultimately, as a funder, if I'm funding code and then people don't share it onwards so that it can be reused, it feels kind of like a waste, right? What's the point in funding something if we don't use it and share it and benefit from it? That's the point of science.
This is such a nice and silly example, right? You get funded for your code and then you write it and nobody sees it. Yes.
Yeah, Damon, does that help your question at all, I guess? I mean, ultimately in your scenario, it does mean that, yeah, it's not like we've solved anything here, because ultimately you're still wondering where that code is. And it might be that you have to rewrite something similar yourself if you can't reuse the other one. Sometimes it's worth approaching people and saying, hey, can I reuse your code? I don't know if I've ever tried that, and I don't know what response rates are like. But it's always worth a try. The worst they can do is say no and you're back where you were, but there's also the chance that they'll say yes and they will send it to you. That doesn't sound encouraging. Just for the recording, yes, I've tried it a lot, writing to the code owner. Let's hope in the future, if we continue to share our work proactively, that will become more of the norm and that other people will continue to do it. With that, I'm going to quickly share my screen and just go through a couple of other slides that talk about things that you maybe want to include when you're sharing your own code. Share screen, desktop 2, and I'll put it in present mode. So this is now, rather than when you're contributing to someone else's repo, this is more about what you should put in your repository when you are when you are writing code that others maybe are going to contribute to or look at or reuse. So the first thing I will say, try to avoid jargon. So I know that throughout this, I've probably been using words that maybe are brand new. I know both Nicoletta and I have tried to explain repository and things like pull requests, but we may have used other words that you weren't familiar with. And that is a barrier to contribution and to participation, which is really hard to see when you've been using that word for a long time. You forget that other people don't necessarily use it. So in this slide here, there's a link to, it calls the 1000 most used words in English. I would be honest, I think if you try and paste an open source or scientific repository into this, it will tell you all sorts of words. I think even science isn't one of the 1000 most common words, but it gives you an idea of places where you have jargon and less simple English that you might want to convert into something simpler. And so by making your language more approachable, it means that people are more likely to contribute and read and reuse your work. have a README file. So in the repository that Nicoletta demonstrated, the README file had the link to the contributing, the tutorial, and gave an idea of what you might use the repository for. It's the first thing, README is an instruction. Read this first. And these have been around for literally decades, README files. So it's a good way to give people an idea, a welcome mat into your repository for GitHub. Consider adding a roadmap. So if you know you're working on features A and B and C, tell people that. Just write it. It could be a few bullet points and say these are the things that are happening next. Maybe even add a few dates. Say this will happen in 2022, or this is going to happen in late 2021. And that way people know that your repository is being maintained and what direction it's going. And that can be really useful. Try and add a contributing guide. So this could be a file called contributing.md, and you're also already really familiar with making files on GitHub now. But tell people what to do if they want to participate. It might you might want to say, here's the files you need to modify to do this. You might want to talk about your code of conduct. You might want to talk about other things that you'd expect when people participate. You might want to say when you want to contribute, comment on an issue. Basically just give instructions for a newbie so that they can think, oh yeah, I'm welcome here and I know what I need to do next. Next slide. Issues. So use GitHub issues to record your bugs and plan new features. You can also use them for discussions. So it's a really good way, again, to prove that your repository is active and open and being shared and being reused. And it means that when people do say, hey, I want to volunteer to work on this, or you might say this doesn't make sense, and you can discuss things and refine them before you write the code, which can be really helpful. It saves a lot of time if you can have discussions as a group with other people. Code of conduct, I've mentioned that it is a really nice way to help people feel like they're going to be welcome, or if something goes wrong, what to do about it. One thing that I will add, always make sure that there's a contact to handle the code of conduct. So this might be a name or an email address, some way that people can contact someone and ask for help. Because if there's a code of conduct but there's no way to do anything about it, then it's not terribly helpful as well. And my favorite one for scientists and for researchers, add some citation guidelines. So people should cite your software if they're using it. You deserve that credit. And so there is actually, GitHub makes it reasonably straightforward to add citation files these days. I think it's a CFF file. And this will just make it a little bit easier to cite it in the same way that you'd cite a paper. And of course, the opposite side of this is if you're using someone's open source software, try and cite it as well. Give them the credit that you want to receive. And add some contact information. Tell them who you are. Tell them if there's problems, what you want to do. If there's questions, how to contact you. It's just a really useful way of making sure that the repository stays alive and can be useful. Do I have anything else? No, that was my last slide. I will unshare. Does anyone else have any questions, perhaps on those sections or on any of the other things that we've been discussing, or comments? Nicoletta, anything you'd like to add or ask?
No, like I said, I'm going through the pull request, and I'm having some back and forth with some people, so that's fantastic. So I will continue doing this and get everyone's names on the website. And yes, that's for me. And hopefully by the end of the day, everyone's going to be online, which is great.
Cool. In that case, I'm going to say well done, everyone who's maybe made a first pull request or even a second or third pull request today. We are super proud of you. It is really cool to see how many have come in. If I look right now, I can see 8 open requests and 16 closed requests. That means we've been merging a whole bunch of stuff and a lot of comments and discussions on the issues as well. So thank you, Nicoletta, for all of the work back and forth, just refining these pull requests. And well done, everyone. Caleb, I think you might want to do the wrap.
Yes, thank you so much, Yo and Nicoletta, for that fantastic one, just making us aware how to and the need to contribute to open source, and then taking us through how to do that, and even getting some of us to make their fast pull requests. So I think that's really fantastic, and I think the participants have learned quite a great deal. So if there's any question, any burning question from the audience, please you can raise your hand or send or just add your question via the chat. But I think the training has actually been really interactive, and we've received a number of questions, and you've answered some of the questions that I would have loved to ask, especially the aspect of imposter syndrome, the aspect of I am just new, where do I start? You've really provided that. And I just want to say that this seminar is just a series or a beginning of a series of events that we'll be holding, and we'll even go deeper into GitHub much later on in the workshops, and especially now you've been able to do it on the web. How can you do it on the command line? So we'll get to provide that additional training. So if you're still feeling a bit scared that you may not have all the skills, stay put. We will be bringing you additional trainings on how to contribute to open source, and also we'll have a hackathon. And during the hackathon now, we'll get to actually put to practice, get to build open source projects, contribute to open source, work collaboratively, and our plan is to ensure that we can take you from creating awareness, making you aware that you can contribute to open source, empowering you, giving you your skills to do that, then giving you an opportunity to actually build and contribute to open source projects. So thank you so much to our lovely audience for joining us today, and a round of applause to Nicoletta and Yo for the fantastic work done in today's presentation. Fantastic. So thank you all. We'll continue engaging via Twitter, and I think we've been using the hashtag BOSS events and Open Science KE, tagging Bioinformatics Hub and Open KE as well, and tagging the presenters as well. So keep engaging, keep the conversation going, and be on the lookout for our other workshops, our other trainer, our other trainings, hackathon, and ultimately the conference. So we'll take you through the whole journey. In the end, during the conference, now you can tell us your story. Tell us how you've been able to start from just being made aware to being able to contribute and build some amazing stuff. So thank you everyone. We'll share via email. We'll share via email some posts, more or less symposium survey, just to get to understand get your feedback on these particular sessions that we've conducted. So please be on the lookout for that. If you haven't added your details to the HackMD document, please do so. That will also help us. We get your Twitter handle, and we can be able to tag you appropriately if we need to.